Whoa. Time for my yearly upload. No, I'm joking. Playing a lot of Nine Kings, and no one has really done a tier list yet. At least not that I know of, because I couldn't find one. So I'm going to do a tier list. This is all 63 base cards. I'm not including the rare cards. I don't care. I'm playing the game a lot. I haven't reached the highest level yet, but I have a pretty good idea what I'm doing, what's going on. So we're going to do a quick tier list video. And by quick, there's 63 cards, meaning it's going to be a long video. So let's just hop right into it. First off, to define the tiers, because I hate it when people make tier lists and they don't define what the tiers are. S tier, absolute staple. You'll see it almost every, if not every single run. Just amazing cards. Or at the very least, cards that are so strong they're good enough to build strategies around. A tier, just a little bit less. You'll still see them almost every run. But you'll probably see a little bit less of them, and they won't be as prevalent, but they're still very core to most strategies. B tier will be less than that. These are still like nice to have. You'll still see them pop up in a lot of runs, but you don't really very often build around them. And they don't take priority over other stuff most of the time, or at least not something that you want to focus on a lot. Then C tier is not great cards, but they still might have a use case. And then D tier, just absolute garbage cards. I basically never want to grab it if I can avoid it. Alright, I know this is alphabetized, but I'm going to do it by king. Let's start with nothing first. Castle. I'm going to put Castle in kind of C tier. All the castles, or, you know, whatever, are a little weird because you're forced to take them. You can only have one, and you can't get multiple. So you can't get, like, King of Greed and then this, or, like, Palace and Castle, whatever. It's decent. You can add to it, you know, if you can sneak a blacksmith next to it or whatever, that's always nice. Although personally, I'll use it as like a dead spot to not draw from farms. This might be almost as a B tier, but I feel like I'm going to put almost every castle in B tier, so I'm just going to put the generic castle in C tier. Going up against, we got archers. I'm going to also put archers. I'll put them in B because there's worse units. They're okay. The problem is both their base stats are really low, so scaling them percentage-wise is kind of hard, or takes a little while longer. And it's nice when you have, for a ranged unit, it's nice when at least their damage is really high because you can scale really high, but at least they have some attack speed. And for the early game, a lot of enchantments and stuff effectively add 1 damage, chain lightning, poisons, blah, blah, blah. So they're decent in the early game. And you almost always want to run King of Nothing anyways, so you're going to have access to archers anyways. They're not a bad unit to plop right in the middle and then start rocking 4 buildings on your middle tile. I'm going to put them in B tier. Up next, Blacksmith. Absolute S tier, absolute staple of any run. It's not unusual by the end of a run if I have 3 or if not 4 blacksmiths surrounding 1 unit or tower. Usually be a unit because you can use quarries for towers. But yeah, you just scale your damage to insane amounts, to millions or billions or whatever. You should always have 3. You should always be spending blacksmiths all around the map, and most units that's job is to deal damage. So your archers, your elves, your bombers, stuff like that. You just want to stack at least 1, if not 2, if not 3, if not 4 blacksmiths on them. You don't have to have them all 4 blacksmiths there right away, but you want to, you know, blacksmiths absolute staple. Then going into farm, I'm going to put farm in A tier. The reason why, well, blacksmiths and most other buildings affect all 4 units they're touching, or all 4 tiles they're touching, whatever. Farms will sort of do the same thing, but they don't stack exponentially. So if the farm is giving 3 units, it'll spread those 3 units out across any tiles it's touching, where a blacksmith will just upgrade all tiles as much as possible. So farms, then they also, I don't know about if they scale as well as, especially for some units, even though they're still very good. But farms, and so what you end up needing to do is either give all your units their own farms, or just sharing a farm and it not being very effective, which makes them take up a lot of space in your kingdom. So I'm gonna put them in A tier. Still definitely pretty much a staple. They're just not as good as blacksmiths. Moving on, we got Paladin. I'm gonna put Paladin also in B tier. I think range units, or kind of more gimmicky units, tend to be better than just raw stat melee units. However, Paladins are still decent at it. They've got a lot of HP. You can scale it really well, and their attack is good too. The main problem with Paladins, one, they only start with 3 units, which really hurts them in the early game. But unit size is not hard to stack, and unit size is all flat numbers set to percentage wise. So if like one unit starts with 10, unit starts with 3, by the time you put the same resources into it, you'll have 110 or 103. Not that big of a deal in the later game, just early game it kind of hurts. So I'm gonna put paladins in B. Decent, use it. Decent tank unit, I like it. Likewise, I'm gonna put soldiers in C. Even though there's more to them, like I just said, I don't think starting units is that, the starting models or whatever you want to say is that big of a deal. And then soldiers have less base stats, which means percentage wise it's harder to, you won't scale them as quickly. They're still fine. I just never want to build soldiers. I feel like if I go soldiers, turn my mic down a bit. If I go soldiers, it's because I had to, and not because I wanted to. Looking for more stuff. Wild card. I'm gonna go wild card. I'll do, even though there's cards that do the same thing but better, I'll still do S tier. You just always want, you're just gonna need a lot of level ups, and wild card just means you can always level up, especially if you're going for cards of another king, and especially if you bought a card off a king you're not fighting. It's nice to have wild cards in your card pool. That way you can still level up that library or that forest or whatever it is that you only have one of. Even though I'll talk about some cards that are better than wild card, but I still would put wild card in S tier. They're really good. Steel coat, another B tier. I think actually most of the enchantments actually aren't too good, but steel coat's okay. Obviously adds tankiness, and it can be easier to stack a lot of steel coats than it can be for HP, although HP will eventually overtake it because libraries only stack a flat amount. The problem with steel coats is that when you get into really late rounds, enemy units, 1, have a huge amount of attack speed, so they just burn through it, and then 2, it's also not, we can't really stack it a percentile way. You have to stack it a flat number. You have a set amount of steel coats, and then 3. If you fight units with AoE, if a bomber blows up in your front line and hits all 115 of your paladins, well, they all just lost a steel coat. And there's 100 bombers, and you have 100 steel coats on your paladins. That means all the bombers just deleted your steel coats. So, it's still pretty good. It lets you also just make a tanky unit for a while and skip out on having high HP. So I'm going to put them in B. And you can also put on like a backline unit, say if you're fighting elves or something. It's nice to have at least 1 or 2 things of steel coat in the early to mid game. That way your backline doesn't immediately melt to elves or thieves or whatever. So I'll put it on B. Scout tower, I'm going to go into... I'll put it in B. It actually is good in the early game and it scales decently. It's never one of the towers I want to like focus on, although sometimes when I'm doing tower builds, I'll just have one at the start and I'll keep it because I've already put so many resources into it. It almost would go down to C tier, but honestly, it's really not that bad. It's also just really exciting. Not exciting, which is the main thing I don't like about it, but we put it on B tier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, that's all the King of Nothings. Let's go on to King of Blood. Sacrifice. I'm gonna put Sacrifice in D tier, unfortunately. Obviously, you could get up to 4 levels off of it. I don't know well, I think I may have gotten 4 levels once or twice, but 1, you have to delete a plot, which costs you turns. Now, sometimes you don't want to delete a plot anyways because you're shifting strategies, or you had to throw something there at the beginning to, just to not lose, and then you want to change. So deleting a plot is still something valuable, and the level ups are valuable. The problem is it's just so unreliable. And there's so many other. I think it's also the worst of the deleting plot cards, to the point where I just put it in D tier. And that's kind of the. You'll see a theme with King of Blood. Everyone talks bad about King of Blood. They think it's the worst one, but I think King of Blood is actually super strong if you run it as your main lord and you build into the cards. I think the problem is King of Blood is terrible if you're for just extra cards like greed, nothing. The King of Woods or whatever the Green King is are all, even if you don't building around those cards, they have amazing cards that can help your strategies. King of Blood doesn't have that, but King of Blood has some actual amazing cards, and we'll get into them in a minute. We should start with the castle. The castle, I'm going to put it into B tier. It summons imps, which is fine. The imps don't really do a whole lot. You can buff it, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be that many imps unless you want to keep dumping decrees and stuff into it. But the nice thing is that you can kind of put them in the back line. You obviously have to take it off auto, your auto castle, but you can put them in the back line and stuff. I think if you only have summons, I think units ignore the summons and they just run straight for your castle, and they can kind of or maybe they won't outrun the imps, but that means the imps can't strike forever, but it is nice to put into the back line. And obviously, there's some things that scale with losing units, so it's nice for that too. We go next. We have Demon Altar. I'm gonna put Demon Altar in B also. The thing that holds Demon Altar back is you only have a set amount of demons per level. Now the actual stat gain is really good for two reasons. One, obviously, every time a unit dies, 0.5%, and then having that happen like 100 times in a round or a year is really good. But he's only stacking onto like 6 models or whatever, or 6 demons. The other thing that I'll say is that it's a building, and all buildings that have damage are affected by quarry. So that's another thing to keep back in mind. But I still just put it like a B tier. It's something you stick in a corner that you don't really want to invest in. It'll do good for a while. It's good in the early game, but I don't really do Demon Altar builds. I don't have like more than 1 or 2, maybe a second Demon Altar in the thing. Carnage. I'm gonna go with C tier. I think scaling HP is a lot worse than scaling your damage and attack speed. Not that it's useless, not that it's bad, but it's just not the best. But Carnage is still decent. You can throw it on defenders, throw it on boars, things that want to have a high HP, and it will do extra damage. In fact, but those strategies are already really specific, so I'm going to keep Carnage in C. It's probably one of the better random cards to pull from Kingdom of Blood if you're not building the thing specifically. But I don't know. I just feel like Carnage is not the best. Same with Vampirism. I'm going to put Vampirism in D. It might help a little bit in the early game, but in my opinion, you really the problem is the game scales to the point where your units are usually either instant deleting enemy units or they're instant deleting you. So building a tank is already iffy. You already have to kind of ride the line with tanks. And then the problem is Vampirism not only needs your unit to be extremely tanky and be tanky based off their HP, not steel coats or anything else, but then also need to do great damage to be affecting that thing. Because if your units are getting instantly deleted, then Vampirism isn't doing things. And you have to keep in mind that you only have 4 tile plots per that can affect a unit. So you need to scale their numbers. You probably need a farm. Then you need to scale their damage, and then you need to scale their HP. And so they're just and then but by scaling both, you're going to get out of hand what you really want. So it's just I don't know. I want to love it, but I just don't think the game is meant for these generic tank units that do damage and take damage. So I'm gonna put it in D. It's okay if you do a boar build and you have a paladin next to the boar, it's fine. But outside of that, I don't really like it. Let's go with Bomber. And Bomber, easy S tier. One of the strongest units in the game, maybe the strongest unit. Which, if you haven't played a Bomber build, this might come to a shock. 2 things. One, you have to play it in Kingdom of Blood because there's a decree that drastically increases its AoE range. Gunpowder will also help affect it, but you kind of want to have a lot of them, so you want to get both Gunpowders and the specific Bomber AoE. Bombers are really nice because, one, all you need to do is stack their numbers and their damage. So you, 1 farm, 3 blacksmiths, for example. You can throw a few steel coats on them if you want, just to help them reach. And if you want to get the movement speed decree at some point too, if you do a bunch of rerolls and you don't get anything good, that's not terrible to have on either. The thing is though, in talking about scaling, if you hit something with an AoE, that AoE kind of exponentially scales the damage. So if I have an elf that shoots 1 arrow and it does 1,000,000 damage, it's pretty good. But if I have a bomber that blows up an AoE and that AoE is massive and I hit 400 units and it does 1,000,000 damage, I've just done 400 million damage with that bomber. And that's really what it is. You get so much AoE that you're basically always fighting hordes of enemies. So every bomber is going to hit 50, 100, 200, 300, 400 models. And by models, I mean the individual guy. And that just scales damage exponentially. So bombers are just really good. But you kind of want to have that access to other decrees, so you do want to go Kingdom of Blood. But it makes Kingdom of Blood super viable. Bombers are absolute S tier. Following up, we're going to also go Cemetery. And some people might find this shocking. I'm going to put 17 in A tier. It's really hard to build around. You have to use a plot that's next to a unit, which you'd want to have a blacksmith or something there. And it doesn't scale that unit very well. But the thing you have to understand about cemetery, and you might not realize this until I say it, cemetery is a building. That sounds obvious. Because it's a building, and because the imps it creates are based off the building stats, that means those imps scale with quarry. You can have like a tower build to have like 8 quarries around the side of the map, and the cemetery imps will all be getting those 2%, 2%, 2% damage from those quarries, and they scale really fast. They scale really fast. So you have these lightning fast little attack imps, and you can have whatever unit you want. That's kind of like a throwaway unit, bombers or whatever else, on the adjacent tile. You maybe multiple adjacent tiles, and all their job is to basically take the first attack, die, summon an imp, and that imp is like a glass cannon that just nukes whatever it spawns next to. Hard to build around, but cemeteries are really good. But you need to be stacking quarries and keep King of Stone in your fighting list. Likewise, imps. I'm gonna go imps with B tier. I almost want to put them in C tier, but they're fast, they're plentiful, they're really good in the early game. They're good at sacrificing stuff if you want to run Demon Altar. I really don't mind imps, and being fast is a double-edged sword. If you're a really tanky unit, I think being fast might not be the best because you don't want to engage with the enemy right away. You just want to survive. But if they are fast, you can kind of combo it with a strong backline because it'll keep the imps will run up to the enemies really quickly and just keep them away from your backline a little bit better. And they'll chase down thieves and other stuff decently well. So I'm gonna put imps barely in B tier. And the last one, Mangler. I'm gonna put Mangler in. Oh man, it's hard. I'm gonna put Mangler in B tier as well. Nah, let's put it in A tier. Mangler is actually really good for 2 reasons. One, it lands in AOE, and AOEs are actually really good to scale because it gives you access to more decrees, which are really effective, and the more you're always hitting blobs at enemies, so that's really good. But the really cool thing about Mangler is that it's one of the few ways to upgrade damage in a flat number, and it's specifically adding it to its damage number. It's a unit to one of its adjacent tiles, and it gets +2 damage, meaning you can get to 30 or 40 or 50 damage really quickly, way faster than you can with some other units and towers. And then if you start adding percentage damage on top of that, it means you just get to those insanely high numbers a lot faster. Having like some sacrificial imps, a palace, and then 2 blacksmiths is really good. If you can get that going, that'll carry you pretty far on a Mangler. Moving on, let's do spells next. I'm gonna put Citadel in C tier, and honestly, out of all the cards in the game, I feel like Citadel I have the least experience with because I don't play King of Spells a whole lot as my main faction or my main king. But I've tried to scale it before, and the game has changed a bit since I've tried it, but I just can't see it getting off the ground. And if you're playing one of the early difficulties or your run goes long, you can make anything do a lot of damage. So Citadel is probably not terrible for that. But it just doesn't wow me. I feel like it's bad in the early game. I'm just going to put Citadel in C tier. If I'm wrong, that's probably the biggest thing I might be wrong on. Maybe Citadel's a sleeper. I do know there's some decrees that buff it. But even those decrees, I don't really see a lot. But anyways, we're going to put Citadel in C tier. Next up, we'll do Library. I'm going to put Library in A tier. Now, Library is probably part of some of the strongest strategies in the game. The problem is, I think, obviously it scales enchantments. The problem is, I don't think those enchantments are always... those strategies are always viable to go into. I think you have to get kind of lucky to do it. And Library, while it does give you extra enchantments, most enchantments aren't... I could just go with Blacksmith. I could just scale exponentially my damage. Library kind of just adds enchantments, and it's not bad. It's still really good. I'm putting it in A tier. I just don't think it's as good or as reliable as just putting Blacksmith on like an elf or a bomber or something like that. But still really good. You can stack Steel Coats infinitely. You can stack Combustion infinitely. Combustion is like is a good way to do extra damage. You can stack Mighty Touch is okay. It also means that whatever unit you have that you want to put a library on, you suddenly can't put on random enchantments because every time you add a new enchantment that's not very good, it makes library way worse because it might buff that. So it also means you all of a sudden have less access to a lot of other enchantments, which is kind of annoying. And the biggest one though is Reinforce is Saxon Fleet. It's a very specific Reinforce build that you have to get lucky to do, but it's really good. We'll go with that there. So Library is an A tier. Offering, I'm gonna put Offering in B tier. It's honestly probably my favorite delete tile card. The reason being, it gives you 3 enchantments or spells or whatever, which could be like clones, it could be wild cards, it could be anything. Which that on its own is really good. That puts you up 3 turns by deleting it, and often it gives you stuff to level up, whatever, and do it other things. But in addition to that, let's say you have like 2 cards you really want to play in your hand, but you can't play both of them, or you have like some maneuver you want to do. Well, if you put an Offering, now you have so many cards in your hand, you can just play whatever. You can play. You don't have to play the 3 enchantments or spells, whatever that it gets you. You can just play whatever. So it gives you a lot of freedom in that sense too. I think Offering's pretty good. I don't get to use it often, so I was going in B tier, but it's probably my favorite out of all the delete plot spells. Next up, Combustion. Combustion going to go into A tier. AoE does 20% of the damage, but obviously if you stack a library onto it, you'll get like 20, 50, 80, whatever combustions. And so if you kill one unit, it just nukes every unit around it. You can get some gunpowders and stuff too. The only problem with combustion is combustion doesn't work if you can't kill the first unit. So if it gets to a point where your whatever glass cannon, elf or archer or something that you have combustion on, if that can't, the enemy team might just roll you over when you get to these really high rounds, and if they can't kill the first unit or model, whatever, then combustion won't do anything. Whereas a blacksmith might have been buffing up even more the whole time, where the overall damage might be less, but you'll be at least able to kill units. So I think combustion, having a library in combustion might fall off before having a blacksmith, but it's still really good. And yeah, it's still really good. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. Very good enchantment. Shaman's B tier. Shaman's to me already an afterthought, but that doesn't necessarily make them a bad thing. They obviously just give their damage to a unit nearby. I don't think you really get away with them in the early game. Having like a unit that basically just gives a bit of extra damage to your backline is hard to justify, and I feel like on higher difficulties you might get rolled over. But they're a really, really good late game unit. And what usually happens is by the time you get to around 30 or 40, I'll have 2, 3, maybe 4 tiles, which are either units or towers, that are been buffed for almost the whole time, and they're very effective at doing stuff. But then I have, but then what happens if I want to add a unit on round 50? Well, it's never going to scale to what I need it to. So to be like a powerhouse damage dealer or tank. So it either needs to do some special trick, or it's basically just useless. And shamans can do that trick where you can just put them on an old plot that probably has a couple blacksmiths attached to it, and maybe you give them a farm at some point when you can. And even though they're not going to scale like crazy, they don't need to scale like crazy. All they're doing is just adding damage to another unit, and that still has them give value. So I'll put shamans in B tier. I think they're a decent like halfway through game unit, and you don't have a lot of those. Coming to the next Spire, I'm gonna put Spire in C tier. I almost want to put Spire in D tier. I don't think healing's super strong, but Spire actually is really good early game. I've had it definitely have me save a lot of lives or save a lot of years where I would have lost. Spire comes in clutch, especially if you get combo with the right units. I don't think healing scales pretty well in the late game because units just get instant deleted anyways. The enemy damage gets so out of hand. Excuse me. But it has a place. It has a use in the early game. If you have a bad turn and you got a Spire, might as well throw it on the Spire. It will do some work. Warlocks. I'm gonna put Warlocks in B tier. They're decent. They do have AoE. I just feel like I never get them off the ground. I don't know. I don't like melee units very much anyways. Especially like tanky frontline melee units. But these ones are decent. Having some like gunpowder and stuff will help them with the AoE. There are other ones I like. There are one or two other cards I like for their job better, but they're not bad. And if you're going, I don't think there's a whole lot of good stuff or reliable stuff in King Spells anyways. So I'll put Warlocks B. Controversially, I'll put, or in abstract, I'll put Wizards in A tier. They're great. They attack very slowly, which is a problem, and it can kind of hurt you sometimes. You have to probably build up that attack speed with a Palace, but they attack hard and they attack an AoE, which are two really good things. So you can scale their damage easily, and the AoE means that they'll also help scale their damage exponentially. I think Wizards are pretty good. I don't like running king of spells as any of my kings, so I don't usually go with them. But if I happen to be fighting them towards the start, I'll put a wizards in my middle plot and really try to buff them up, and they can do some work. They also have not the longest attack range, which is kind of a problem. But anyways, and static, I'm gonna put static in D tier. No offense to static. I think it's okay at the very start of the game, but it's just like a flat. You're using a whole turn to give like one card flat, like 1 damage, and it's not even damage that scales off of like blacksmith or something. You just hit and it'll do 1 or 2 damage, like 1 or 2 or however many points of damage to like a few enemies. I think it's pretty bad. I still might give it to like some archers turn 1 if I have, or like turn 2 if I have nothing else to do. But I hate static. They might be good with some ballistas too, but I don't know. It just doesn't really do very much damage. If it's scaled, instead of doing +1 damage, if it scaled off the target's damage, it would be really good. It would be like kind of like a cleave almost, but it doesn't do that. Moving on, let's go into green, King of the Woods, whatever it's called. I don't know. Where's the browse? I'm gonna put there. I know I put in a lot of castles in B. I'm gonna put the tree in B. So it does damage and healing. And it's also not very good in auto, so you kind of have to, if you want to build into it, you kind of have to play off the auto castle, which is kind of annoying. But damage and healing is really low, and it really will not do a whole lot at the start. But it does have a huge AoE, and also I don't think healing is that strong. But it does have a huge AoE, which is actually really nice because it means you can hit a lot of units. So if you want to risk it and really try to buff up that damage through leveling it up and adding some blacksmiths and whatnot, you can get it to where even if it doesn't do that crazy damage towards that mid game, you're still hitting like 20, 50, 80, 100 units or 100 models, and then that can help get its damage up. So risky. I don't think it's the best. It's definitely not the best castle by far, but I think it's decent. And if you do want to do a healing build, you probably want to have it in there. Moving on, let's go with Clone. Clone's an easy S tier. Better than Wild Card because you can use it as a Wild Card, and it has extra utility of you can clone something and put it somewhere else. So say if you have you want to put a farm or a blacksmith somewhere else, you can do that. If you start stacking Overworks, Overworks is probably the best degree in the game. You can, instead of leveling up the already existing blacksmith, you can then clone it and have it in 2 slots. So instead of going from 2 to 3 buffs, it'll go 2 to 4 buffs, if that makes sense, because Overwork will affect both blacksmiths. Clone, super good. Until your entire plot or your entire kingdom is fully leveled up, you basically want to be dropping clones. Likewise, Procreate, S tier. I think it's one thing that makes these 2 cards makes not only the mid game but in the late game fighting woods or fighting green really strong, is because you can stack clones all the way up until you have everything fully leveled up, which is very late. And then also Procreates. You can always just throw Procreates down. It's a nice having access to cards in the late game that no matter what your build is will basically, unless you have like all towers or something, always give you value is really nice. And Procreate just is really good. You have that insane unit, and maybe you've even taken off the farm off that unit and just done like 4 blacksmiths or whatever. And you can still just throw Procreates onto every few turns and just keep those units going on. Likewise, Elves, S tier. I think they're the best ranged unit in the game. Their attack speed's super slow, so you have to I usually put 1 or 2 palaces on them until it gets to a point where they attack super fast, and then I'll go all into blacksmiths. And I also throw in a few steel coats too on them, just as I get them playing with nothing, or playing against nothing. But I think they're super good to carry. Their damage is already so high that you can just scale the damage to insane proportions. And then all you need to really do is build the rest of the army around them just to buy them a few seconds to delete the enemy army, and just maybe give them some survivability in the form of steel coats or something like that. But yeah, elves and bombers, my 2 favorite units. I put them both in S tier. I absolutely love them. Moving on, forests. I'm gonna put forests in. I almost want to put it in B, but people might get mad. I'm gonna put it in A tier. You scale HP. Again, I really don't think stuff like that scales very well into the late game, but early mid game, forests can be pretty good. They're really good on having some taking units, and also boar is a big reason why forests are good, because boar basically will massively buff another unit, and you need to give the boars forests. So that's a big reason why I would put boar up. Is why forests are in A tier, because of boar, and also defenders. We'll talk about defenders later. But yeah, I'm gonna put it in barely A tier. I don't think it's as good as farms. I don't think it's nearly as good as like blacksmiths or some of the other buildings to keep buffing up units. But you still probably in most strategies are going to want some kind of front line to at least buy whatever time you can. And forests are a decently reliable way of doing that. You just get forests with whatever kind of already tanky unit, and you just hope that they live for a while. Eventually, your army will basically get the enemy army will basically delete no matter what anything, no matter what you throw at them. So eventually, the forests do fall off, but I think I'll put them in A tier. Likewise, boar. I'm gonna put boar in B tier. Like I said, they're already good. They also help with forest slot. The problem is boar, as far as I can tell, and I've tested this, and I'm pretty sure is how it is. They said they'll let adjacent units ride them. I think the unit has to actually be adjacent to them on the tile. It can't just be when they spawn. Usually, I like to have one unit being surrounded by 4 buildings, and I'll have the kind of like checker pattern grid where units will be on the one, the middle whatever tiles, and the buildings will be on the corners. For this, you have to have a unit next to it, so you could have a boar with 3 buildings surrounding it, and then another unit with 3 buildings surrounding it. And it's kind of just awkward to build around. It kind of messes up your really nice laid out kingdom, but it's still pretty good. If you get the HP scaling a lot, and if you can scale the other unit a lot, then it just exponential growth, and it kind of goes crazy. It was one of the few ways to make a really tanky front line effective. It's just hard to build, so I'm gonna keep them in B. Whatever the fucking spore things are, I don't know. I'm gonna put them in B tier 2. They're building, they can scale really well. I feel like they're just kind of hard to build around, and I feel like it takes a while for them to take off. But they can go kind of crazy if you get some blacksmiths around them, eventually a bunch of quarries. And this might be one of the other cards that I might be wrong on. If I'm wrong on these, if these are actually cracked, if you start with the elf, or sorry, if you start with King of Woods and then always fight King of Stone, maybe this is like the build to go. I don't know, but I'm gonna put them in B tier. Orchids also gonna go in B tier. I've started putting a lot of things in B tier, but orchids are actually really nice, and they're a good way to build like a pseudo front line because they'll basically just hold units in place, and it doesn't matter how strong an enemy unit is. Like, it could have 18 billion HP and 18 billion damage, an orchid will still hold it. So it's nice. I don't usually start out with them, but you can scale them with some attack speed and stuff, which is good. But it's nice to have them in the late game when you have those edge plots that don't really need to have anything there. You haven't really built for them because you built some like palaces, some other stuff, or some vaults or whatever, some other stuff. It's nice to have the orchid in those edge slots, and they'll just help hold off the enemy rush. It's really good. And then Poison Vial. I'm going to put Poison Vial in D tier. Really sorry. It kind of adds 1 damage. It's okay at the start, but I just don't think Poison's that good. It's better to scale damage and stuff. Here, I'll put Poison in C. It's okay in the early game. And you do have some decrees I can go into it. I think if you're just trying to beat the game, not go super late, then Poison's okay. But it's almost in D tier for me. It'd be so close to D tier. Moving on, let's go King of Greed. I think King of Greed is one of the other really, really good kings. And we'll start with Palace. Palace is an S tier. It's kind of with a big asterisk. So, but Palace is really good, and it recently got buffed in the most recent patch. Obviously, it instantly deletes a unit, and if you hit a gold unit, it gives you money. One of the problems is if you put it on auto, it will attack the gold unit, but the gold unit doesn't. It's just like a quarter-second delay of the unit turning gold, and the Palace won't wait for that. So it'll never give you money when you turn on auto. So you have to turn auto off to do that, and then it's not, then it's really annoying to play. And honestly, it shouldn't be fixed. Palace is too good. If there's 2 weird, gimmicky, buggy things about it, and if those 2 things got fixed, there would be no other strategy in the game other than Palace. Like Palace would just be Palace. It would be everything else and then Palace. The 2 buggy things are 1, the killing gold units on auto. It's weird that it doesn't, and it's really annoying because I don't like playing. I like playing with the auto castle thing on. But if you just could always guarantee it would be insane. And then the second thing about Palace is even though you can buff its attack speed, at some point it just doesn't matter. The auto select can't keep up with attack speed of 2 or 3 or 4 or 500. It just can't hit everything. So there's really no reason to buff it past, like, I don't know what the number is, but if you buff it past 100, I don't think it does anything. at that point you might as well just you should really just be doing it manually anyways, and that really sucks because you could miss or the game could go really fast or whatever, or you just have to pay attention. It's kind of annoying because like this game is more like an auto result kind of game. But yeah, outside of that, even though Palace is still absolute S tier, it gives you crazy good economy in the early game, which is when you really want that good economy. And it scales really well for the entire game. The fact that you can instantly kill anything but the bosses. Another problem is it doesn't really help you. You have to. It helps you a lot on bosses, but it won't kill the boss. So you have to still scale the rest of your army because you don't want this boss to sell the rest of your army. But the weird thing is, and no other card really works like this, is like at some point you just stop scaling Palace. You get it to like 100 attack speed or whatever the number is. I haven't really found it yet, but whatever the ideal number is, and then you could keep the beacons on it if you have other buildings or other units and towers that are using it. But if you don't, you just delete the beacons because there's no reason to take Palace past like 100 attack speed because the game just can't handle it. There's no real way. You're basically already going to instantly delete anything you hover your mouse over. And I don't think any like gunpowder or any AoEs increases like the targeting area. And so yeah, it's very weird. But it is super powerful to have that, and that tool to basically instantly delete anything you hover over will stay with you for the whole game. It's just eventually the game gets so, even on the slowest speed, the game gets so fast that it's physically hard for you to move your mouse in a way that kills everything. But still absolute S tier for all the reasons I mentioned. Likewise, Beacon, S tier. Right behind damage, attack speed is also super important. If you have a unit with a really low attack speed, like elves, you can at least get it up to like 2, 3, 4, maybe 10 attacks a second. You could keep scaling it forever, or you can cut it off and just do damage. Either way, Beacon scales a lot of things really well. Dispenser, I'm going to put Dispenser just barely in A tier. It's really good. Obviously, if you're already running King of Greed, you're going to have great economy, which will help do more, I think. And Dispenser, outside of Dispenser and Mangler, and there's one other tower, are basically the 3 towers that scale the best. They're and they're, if any kind of tower strategies are super strong because Quarry is an insane card. Yeah, these two and one other tower are the best towers in the game to try to scale into. But it takes a long time to get started, though. I will say that. Mercenaries, I'm gonna put Mercenaries in D tier. But as cool as it is, like I just want to use the gold. I need to use the gold to buy cards, be ahead in cards played per year and stuff like that. And Mercenaries just means you can't buy cards. It's really weird. And it's not like their stats are that crazy either to make up for it. If it was something like every 30 gold gained, you get +1 population, it'd be fine. But because you need to keep the gold bank, it just sucks. It just, you can either, if you go for this unit, you basically hamstring your entire economy. So why would you ever do it when I can just go Paladin or Soldier or something and have comparable stats, and still scale the population fine. Yeah, Soldier D tier or Mercenary D tier. I wish they would rework it, even if it doesn't make as much sense. I wish they work it. Midas Touch B tier. Good way to build your economy. Put it on your glass cannon unit. Pretty good. Only problem is if you don't, you only need so much gold. I mean, more gold the better, but at some point, and if you want to basically put a library on something, well then if you put Midas Touch, it's not going to be, that library will be scaling Midas Touch as well as the Combustion or the Steel Coat or whatever or enchantment you have, and that kind of might lessen the damage. So you have to be a little careful with Midas Touch, but still very good card. Put in B tier. I'll throw it on my glass cannon units if I don't want to build library. Pretty good. Mortgage, I'm going to put Mortgage in B tier as well. Not as good as Offering, but it's still pretty good. That 30 gold is a nice amount. Scales your Dispenser, and then if you have like a shop coming up or something, I think Offering's still the better delete plot unit, or I guess there's one that's even better than both, but Offering's still better, but I'll still use Mortgages on occasion. So I'll put them in B tier. Almost C tier, but I'll put them in B tier. Overinvest, easy S tier. One of the big reasons why King of Greed is so good to keep fighting is, one, your economy is really good, so you should be able to afford a lot of rerolls. But then Overinvest, it's just a great card. It doesn't matter if your entire kingdom is fully maxed out and you're just seeing how far you can scale. Overinvest, 30 gold, 15% to stats is great. Especially if you like stop scaling attack speed, for example, or stop scaling damage. I don't know why you do that, but Overinvest will still help buff that attack speed or damage or whatever, and keep it moving along, even if you don't have tower or buildings on it anymore, affecting that. And it's also just big percentage gain. Very nice. So overinvest, absolutely amazing card. Likewise, Thieves are gonna go into A tier. Now we're gonna put them in S tier. I think Thieves are really, really good. They have a good decree too with instant crit. You can also get precision and stuff. I think most melee units are generally worse than ranged units because melee units have to interact with the enemy army and they have a case of getting instantly deleted. But Thieves are gimmicky in the fact that they teleport into the backline, which is two amazing things. One, if your army has a strong backline, it's nice to attack those first and destroy them. And two, it makes the rest of most of their army have to run back to kill them, which even though Thieves aren't as tanky as some other units, that movement or movement shenanigans will mean that the enemy army will take longer to reach you because they're falling back to destroy the Thieves. So in effect, Thieves actually make not only great backline killers, but they also just make great tanks because they just delay the enemy army for a very long period of time. And you don't have to invest in HP in them. I would throw some steel coats on them sometimes. I don't usually invest HP into Thieves. I just put steel coats, some attack speed, some damages, put some precisions on there. Pretty good. Love Thieves. Great unit. And last one else is Vault. I'm going to put Vault in B tier. It's almost A tier. I do really like Vaults, but you don't really ever build into Vaults. You just usually want one, maybe two. You know, if you have like 8 Vaults and like 3 dispensers, I guess that's like a strategy. But I feel like that'd be pretty hard to get off the ground. And Vaults, and for the early and mid game, most of the tiles you have access to, unless you're going like specific perks and stuff, are tiles that need to have blacksmiths and farms, and they're all enforced and all there for the buff your units. When you get to the late game and you get to the very edge tiles that are kind of garbage and you don't really need them for stuff, it's great to throw 1 or 2 Vaults in those edge tiles. Same with things like orchids or whatever that is and stuff, and quarries especially. But so the Vaults are good. They help really. They're a good way to increase your economy, but I don't think they're amazing. Like I don't want like 4 Vaults in by round 30. Like I feel like I'd rather have blacksmiths and farms and units that are doing stuff. Anyways, that's King of Greed. Let's move on to King of Stone. First other Stronghold. Again, I'm gonna put it in B tier. I know I put a lot of castles in B tier, but Stronghold's good. You can put Cauldron on it too. We'll talk about Cauldron in a second, but they're good. Does good damage. The damage kind of scales up over the course of the round too. So if you build tanky, which Stone builds tanky in a very gimmicky way through like walls and stuff. But it still means that the damage will ramp up over the course of the round, and that is good. So it's still a good castle. I'd probably rather have the Stronghold more than the default castle and some of the other ones, but I don't think it's anything crazy to build around. Up next, Ballistas. I'm going to put Ballistas in C tier. I'm sure that if you can get a run going for a long time and you start buffing Ballistas the entire time, I'm sure they're absolutely cracked. The fact that they cleave through everything means like a normal AoE, their damage goes exponentially. They're really good. The problem is Ballistas, they start out with 3 units and their attack speed is so small. On those later difficulties, I feel like I can never go Ballista and win. I feel like they're so weak if I start to trying to buff them that I'll just lose the game. And if I put them later into the game, then they just don't do anything because they haven't had enough time to scale because of their low attack speeds and numbers. So it's like this weird middle ground where, like, maybe the perfect run, you could get them to work, but I just can never get them to work. I feel like every time I try to go Ballistas, I feel like I just killed my run. They're probably one of the units they're probably, in terms of like the floor and the ceiling, they're probably one of the units with like the widest gap between the floor and the ceiling. Crazy high potential. Very poor output. Up next is Cauldron. I wanted to put Cauldron in D tier so badly, but it actually has one very good use. That very good use is big damage buffs in the early game. I don't think any late game strategy going to around 60, 70 plus will probably use Cauldron because you can I guess it does work on buildings and you can't get poison on buildings any other way. But if you can get poison on units, just put a couple of vials, poison vials on there, and then you can save this plot for a blacksmith or a farm or whatever. But in the very early game, it does give you a pretty massive damage boost, and on those later difficulties, you kind of really need that damage boost. So for that fact alone, it goes out of D tier into C tier. And in fact, if I am playing stone a lot, I actually will use a cauldron pretty often, just to and I'll delete it later once all the other plots are filled up with good buildings. But it will help. I have had cauldron help carry me through some difficult early games. Up next is Earthworks. Earthworks easy S tier. It's the best of the deleting plot things. One, because you just get the cards back. So obviously you don't want to do it on a unit or a tower you've been buffing for a long time, but anything else or anything you just placed down like a few turns ago is really good on. And it just gives you more tiles. You get more tiles for free. It gives crazy value out of this. Throwing in a couple Earthworks, you just get this massive kingdom. You can start flexing that stuff, especially start stacking Overworks and Quarries and stuff. Earthworks is so good, and it's one of like the 2 or 3 S tier cards in Kingdom of Stone that just slaps. Like, it just makes Stone strong. Talk about S tier cards. We'll go to Flamethrower. Flamethrower, super good tower. One of the biggest problems with Flamethrower is that it takes time to get to the opponent, and on those later rounds, they'll literally be in your face if you don't have a good rest of your army, and the Flamethrower will have no time to deal with them. But early, mid, and even a bit in late game, it's really good. The base stats of it are really good with a 10 attack speed, and even though the damage is only 1, Cauldron affects it really well. It's basically doubling the damage because it gives you a stack of poison each time it attacks. So that takes care of the early game damage. And eventually you can, with all the quarries, your Flamethrower will start to do damage. In the individual instances of damage will start to be really high. So it's not the biggest issue. It's so strong in the early game, strong in the mid game, and like most towers, if you have a bunch of cores, it'll be super strong in the late game. The only thing is that the fact that it moves around is kind of a problem. So you have to build, the rest of your army needs to be able to hold the enemies in place for the Flamethrower to get into position. But I think it's by far the best tower. And even though maybe like the Wrangler and the Dispenser may outclass it in the late game, having a Flamethrower will still do plenty of work in the late game, and it'll carry you for the early and mid game, where these 2 towers might struggle to carry you in those higher difficulties at the very start of the game. Last one I'll leave, Quarry. Quarry, maybe one of the best cards in the game. Maybe it's the best card in the game. The reason being, quarries affect all the buildings, not just the ones they're next to. So when you build like your core kingdom, where you have like some units, some towers, and all the buffing buildings, and you have all these tiles on the outside which you can put garbage on. That's not going to scale very well. Maybe do some stuff, or you can just stuff it loaded with quarries. You can have like 8 or 9 quarries, and those quarries will just boost your tower damage to insane amounts. And it's a great way where the rest of your army can still be like a normal army, but then you just have 1 or 2 or 3 towers, or however many towers, that just get buffed to oblivion, because you can stuff all these quarries on the very edges of the map and they still affect everything. Absolutely amazing card. Quarries are super strong. Trappers, I'm gonna put Trappers in C tier. It's nice that they keep building traps the whole time, but you know, if you have to scale damage, you have to run into it. It's very gimmicky. I don't think the traps really slow things down, and you know, it takes 1 turn where the enemy army gets to your traps, and then just delete all your traps. So I'm not gonna put them in D tier because they can still be okay in the early and middle game. But I think the trappers aren't that good. Trebuchets C tier as well. They just don't excite me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe trebuchets are better than towers, and they do shoot more projectiles as you get a really big kingdom. But that means you have to start up for them, so you have to scale them for a long time. They don't get good until later. I'm gonna put trebuchets in C tier too. Maybe they are better than scout towers. I don't know, but they're definitely not better than the other towers. So I'd just rather take the other towers. I don't really care. And Stoneworks, and put Stoneworks and Steam Wheels too. Stoneworks is actually pretty good in the early and middle game. They are pretty good, and because they have an HP stat, I think technically they do scale off of Forest. If you want to put like a stone builder or whatever it's called, or wall builder, and put some Forest next to it. But again, and maybe you're adding like 10,000, 50,000, maybe you're adding 1,000,000 HP walls every turn. That's amazing. But as soon as the enemy gets that wall and deletes it, well, you just well, then the next time they get to the wall, it's not going to even exist because they've already been deleting, like, it's stacking forever. So maybe it helps in the early game a little bit, and that's, you can put it in C tier because of that. I think if a card helps you a lot in the early game, it's fine. But in the late game, at most, maybe it saves you a round. I don't think it will save you more than 1 round. So I'm going to put it in C tier. And you have to kind of build into it which takes up a lot of plots. And it's HP, not damage, so they don't. I don't think they get affected by Core. You have to specifically put force into that. If they changed that where it was a damage stat, but the damage stat was still just HP on a wall, and Corey's buffed it, maybe it'd be better. But anyways, moving on to our last king here, King of Progress. Definitely the weirdest king out of all of them. Focusing on level ups and stuff. We're going right into it with the I can't remember what it's called. I can't read it, but their castle. I'm gonna put that in C tier too. It doesn't AOE, it follows stuff around. One problem is when you put it on auto, it doesn't always necessarily target the most units it can, which is kind of annoying. So you have to play manually to get the most out of it. And you know, like it's just alright. I'd rather do some of the other ones. Some of the other towers have more interesting utility, better builds. It's just an okay AOE tower. You go in B tier, and again, I'm sure you could stack a bunch of Corys and stack a bunch of attack speed, and it still could like go all out. But you have to take it. It's, you know, would you take one of these if you didn't have to take any kind of castle? Probably not. So I'm just gonna put it in C tier. It's not bad, not terrible. Coming up, we have the upgrade thing. I really can't read it; they're so small. But you know what this is. You level it up 3 times, and it levels everything up. It's pretty nice. There is a lot of bugs and exploits with this card. I think they've all been patched out by now. But the problem with this is it's too much to build into. Even though the payoff is crazy, having to place one down, which puts you a turn behind, and place another one down, which puts you a turn behind, and then finally leveling up a 3rd time, and then you have a dead plot you have to delete it from too. So that's another turn. It's just a huge investment. It's sometimes, yeah, definitely there are times you can pull it off, but I feel like it's a really risky, especially in those higher difficulties where you really don't want to fall several turns behind. You want to be several turns ahead in playing cards, not behind. And so I think it's pretty risky. But still definitely has a place. Go to Plant Solid Teeth. C tier. Converter. I feel terrible. I'm going to put in D tier. Again, another card I haven't experimented a lot with. And there was like a really game-breaking exploit with this a little while ago that got patched out. Base stats just aren't good. Rats aren't good on their own. A plot of rats is really good. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you know, there's just so many other towers that I think would be way better. Plus, if it kills a unit and summons a rat, if the rat's the only thing that's left is a summoned rat, they'll just ignore it and they'll run to your castle, and the rat will just be running behind. So I'm gonna put them in D tier. All towers have the potential to be crazy strong with Corys, so I'm sure you can still get off the ground. But it's like, why would you use this when you can use some of the other S tier towers, which are spread across all the other kings? You know, so I'm gonna put them there. Defenders, I'm gonna put defenders in A tier. Almost S tier, but I think they're really good. Obviously, one of the better frontline units. What's really nice about them is you just don't need damage. Unlike things like Paladins and Warlocks, you just don't need damage on them. So all you have to do is put farms and forests. And then maybe if you want to put some enchantment on them, you could scale them to the library, like a Tarnish or something. But one of the best frontline, or maybe if not the best frontline unit in the game. Super easy to build into, unlike a lot of the other frontline units where you have to kind of pick and choose what you want to focus on. Really good. I love defenders. Good in the early game, good in the mid game, good in the late game. Like executioners, I think executioners are D tier. Probably the worst range unit in the game. Their gimmick is that they shoot the lowest HP unit, which is not terrible. But one, your lowest HP unit might be that you want to hit might be way far in the back, out of the reach, like elves or something. But then two, the game doesn't really work like that. The game's had like a slow grind of strategy and whatnot, especially towards the mid and late game. You're either wiping your enemy or they're wiping you. Targeting like the lowest unit is fine. It's not bad, especially like clearing out some thieves or some other stuff. But it doesn't make up for their just terrible base stats. They do 1 damage. Their base stats are just absolutely abysmal. They don't even have that much range. It just makes it really hard to scale. I feel like if you go into executioners, you're gimping your run. There's no reason really to take them over some of the other really strong ranged units. Up next is Lab Rats. I'm going to put Lab Rats. I'm going to put them in A tier. They didn't get really nerfed last patch because the rare building that upgrades stuff, the Shrine or whatever it's called, sort of got nerfed. It now does only 1 level up per level, but it gets cheaper. Instead of it doing 3 level, it only does 1 level up regardless of the level, instead of the other way around. So before, you could have a Shrine and you could have a Lab Rat, and the Lab Rat would level up 3 times every turn, assuming the rest of your kingdom was fully leveled. The problem with that was the shrine would then gimp your economy, so you need to have a good economy set in place before you place it. Yada yada. Who cares? On its own, that means lab rats scale really well. It means that they don't need a farm because they'll get their population from level ups. Assuming you get that one specific super rare card, you can also use other level ups into them, but I don't really think it's worth it. The main problem with lab rats is that it's just super hard to build into them. You basically need that card. I don't think it's really viable to go into lab rats using just relying on just like wild cards and clones and the other level up things. I just don't think it's very viable for them. I think you need to get that rare card and then go into lab rats. And then you want to use reinforces on top of that, which we'll talk about in a second. So even though I think it's one of the strongest strategies in the game, it is so hard and so unreliable to go into. I'm gonna put it in A tier. But the other thing is you can also kind of build into it a little later, and it's still fine. So even if you get the shrine or whatever the rare card's called later on in the game, you can still pivot into it without too much effort. But it's still just very hard. So I'm gonna put them in A. Probably one of the strongest strategies in the game is to infinitely level up lab rats and proc reinforce or whatever. But it's not super reliable, so it says in A tier. Overall, or whatever this is called, I'm gonna put it in D tier as well. You delete a plot and it gives you 2 random level ups instead of leveling everything up adjacent to it. I think it's a little better than Sacrifice, because Sacrifice is just super hard to build around. Because usually the plots that you want to level up are adjacent to other plots that you want to keep. So you don't want to delete them. Where overall you can delete something on one side of the kingdom and level something on the other side. But still, I'd rather get 3 spells, which half the time you'll get some wild cards and clones anyways, or get some gold out of it or whatever. I just don't think it's super reliable, but definitely better than Sacrifice. Precision, I'm gonna put Precision in A tier. It now finally stacks. Although I'm not really sure the exact way it stacks. I haven't tested it a whole lot yet, but in the last patch it got buffed. Good way to do damage. There's decrees that give you double damage, or sorry, that make crits do double damage. So it's a good way to guarantee these huge numbers to open up with. And you can put Combustion. Is another good way to combine with Combustion, because there you got Elves and Combustion. It'll help that very initial attack make sure it kills a unit. And then that'll proc the Combustions, which do a bunch of damage. So precisions are pretty good. And last up, Reinforce is definitely an S tier, giving you 1% damage every time something levels up. The thing is, obviously, it's really nice to be able to get percentage damage increases that aren't through Blacksmith. Blacksmith takes up the tiles, but Overinvest is really strong because you can give percentage damage increases to something without taking up tiles, but then also Reinforce, and also Quarry, because you can do it another tiles away from the thing, but also Reinforce works really well because it doesn't really take up any plots of land. You can just have it on your main damage dealing unit, and it'll just keep adding percentage damages throughout the game. And the more every time you add a percentage damage increase, the next percentage is even more valuable. So anytime you can ever get it, it just compounds. The last thing I'll say about it is it's part of one of the best strategies in the game, which is if you put Reinforce on your glass cannon unit, let's say you got Elves, for example, but it could be whatever, or your damage dealing unit. Then you have Lab Rats off to the side, and then you infinitely level up Lab Rats, and you put a library on the unit that's getting Reinforced. Well, you can easily get 20, 30, 50, 70 of these in the game, and then every time the Lab Rat levels up, it then gives you that much damage. So let's say you have 100, and then your Lab Rat levels every time. You're doubling the damage of that unit every time. And, before, if you're increasing it by like 20% by having a bunch of Blacksmiths and Overworks, that's already getting you to like crazy, insane numbers. But imagine if you're doubling it. I think that strategy is probably the best way to scale damage in the very late game. It's just super, super hard to build, but that's why I'll put it in S tier. But even if you can't make that strategy, as long as you're not like keeping your enchantments pure for libraries so we don't waste them, throwing a couple reinforcements on your thing, on your main glass cannon or main damage dealing unit will still be really good. So, anyways, that's the tier list. Let me know what you think. Real quick, I didn't put the rare cards in it, but I probably put Goats in A, the Rays in B. It's good, but it kind of hurts your late game, but it's good to get extra decree. And then the Shrine in S tier is probably what I would do. Goats are also really good because they act as a backline unit, and they just they're just another thing to take up some damage and tank and build some economy. They're pretty good. Anyways, that's the tier list. Let me know what you guys think. I'll probably link it down below if you want to make your own. But yeah, see you guys again in a year when I find a new game to make a video on.